Well, hello, you happily miserable accursed. David Herle right here. Scott Reid right here. And today in the one smart conservative versus two worn-out liberals guest chair, we have good friend of the pod, Dennis Matthews. You all know Dennis. I mean, how can you not know Dennis? He's a partner at Enterprise Canada, president of its ad agency and content studio Creative Currency, key advertising advisor to Prime Minister Harper, one of the architects of Tim Houston's incredible win in Nova Scotia, and the guy who helped Doug get it done here in Ontario. All right, here's where we're going today. Poilievre's first official week as leader of the official opposition. Polls are out. Some interesting data to look at. We'll look at Poilievre's first week. And how is Poilievre going to treat the mainstream media? And does that even matter? How effectively can the Liberal government defend itself in the fight over cost of living? Our cursed clipping this week is Jacques Gallant's piece in the Star on why it's virtually impossible to abolish the monarchy in Canada. But is it a political issue worth pursuing? At that point, we'll be all out of juice, and Gordon Pinsett will mercifully close us out with the Hey Yous. Scott, Dennis, how the heck are you guys today?
I'm great, David.
Well, I'll be exact. I'll tell you how he is. He's hairless, and I have hair, and I want to clarify for anybody who may be watching on YouTube, contrary to what Dennis Matthews thinks, my hair is real. This is the real McCoy right here. Gray.
What about the stuff on the top?
All real.
I believe you on the side. What about that thing on the top? You took that from Letterman when he retired.
It's just too perfect, and that's the tell. It's too perfect.
Yeah. People.
Nobody will ever say that about me, Dennis.
No, or about me.
Do not have a hair piece. Do not have a cod piece. No piece. No piece at all.
Hey, Scott, can you see this album over my shoulder?
Yeah. It's Willie. Is that Red? It's not Redheaded Stranger. What is that?
Willie Sings Christofferson. Do you have that up?
Ooh, no, I don't. You know what? I had that on cassette, I think. It's old, eh? That's like mid-'80s or maybe earlier?
Earlier.
Yeah.
I went out and I bought some vinyl this past weekend because I'm getting the old turntable up and running. Of course, I had to buy used vinyl because new vinyl's $80.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand. If you want to hear the new Harry Styles, you could hear it for free on your streaming service, or you could pay $80 for an album. Like, what is that? What's the economics of that?
Well, I'll open the floor to Dennis, but I think it's got a lot to do with carbon. And I think that vinyl is now actually not vinyl. I think it's made out of legumes, I think, right? It's plant-based and extraordinarily cost-intensive to harvest and press into little round.
Yeah, I knew you guys were going to go down the music path, which is very stressful to me because I don't have a lot to add to that. And if you put me on the spot, that would be a struggle. But I think they're just not making a lot of vinyl these days. And so the cost is going up, the cost per unit. That's your problem.
It sells, apparently, they sell more vinyl than they do CDs. Anyway, interesting. So, guys, a big thing this week. I mean, I know that a lot of the media attention was on the Queen's funeral and certainly for many a somber occasion, and I don't mean to dismiss it, but in the background, there was politics going on. And Poilievre had his first full week as leader. Some of the things we may not remember from last week are the news conference and the altercation with David Aiken, the unveiling of Poilievre's team, some reshuffling of the party infrastructure, and two polls. Yesterday, Abacus, and today, Leger, that both effectively say the same things. Conservatives 5-6 points ahead of the Liberals, narrowly ahead in Ontario, big leads out west, obviously. And no real bounce for the Conservatives in Quebec, as near as I can tell, but elsewhere in Ontario and West, pretty good numbers for Poilievre. The Liberals under 30. Leger has them at 28. So let's start. Dennis, what do you think of Poilievre's first week? How did he do, and what does it portend?
Yeah, so it's interesting, David. You mentioned sort of being in the shadow of the Queen. What I would say here is there's also a difference between when O'Toole came in and when Scheer came in. That Poilievre kind of got a clean start here. when Scheer started, the results were sort of disputed. There was a bit of chaos at the beginning, and then it became this very quick march to an election. And so it felt like he never really got on a solid footing. You look at Aaron O'Toole in the middle of the pandemic, and it was really hard to get any attention, hard to recruit staff, all that kind of stuff. It was sort of a cloudy time. And, now you look here, Pierre, he got an actual sort of an overwhelming, a thumping, really of a victory. And so, he's clean on the party side, and there's no election looming tomorrow. So he's able to, I think, do a bigger reset of the party and the people around him than the two previous leaders have got. And, you saw some of that with, Mike Crace coming in to run the party apparatus. Like, this is a seasoned operator from Ontario. So you're seeing some change right out of the gate. You see a different front bench than before. I think, all things considered, a very clean start, and he wants to be the guy who's talking about cost of living and inflation and the things that come from that and his worldview of government. And he got those things out. Like, you have to say, if you set some objectives for him, get out there in a clean way and start building a foundation. I think by most measures he's getting that done.
Scott, you see anything interesting?
I thought the most interesting thing was that I didn't see much. Like, it was an internal week, not an external week. That might have been a tactical decision, like strictly a tactical decision based on the Queen's funeral, and say, well, why bother trying to compete in the news hole? Like, it's just going to be scenes of Windsor Castle, scenes of Westminster, scenes of people marching through streets. So why bother? But I also thought it probably has a lot of strategic benefit. Like, he didn't come out of the gate. Like, what do we know about the guy? We know that he's hyper oxygenated, right? He's got hard charging all the time. And I thought it was notable that this hard charging, barbed wire politician in his first week didn't spend a lot of time in front of us as Canadians. Instead, as Dennis is saying, he spent some time, doing his knitting. I assume he spent a lot more time doing a lot more knitting that we haven't seen yet, right? So a lot of internal plumbing, get that stuff. I think he sort of thought, well, I've got the luxury. I think the interesting week is going to be this week. One, I presume we'll see a shadow cabinet. I think that's going to be, that'll be interesting, those choices. And he showed his leadership team last week, and I thought it was, shrewdly balanced and all those kinds of things. I didn't withdraw a lot of big notable conclusions from it, but I think his shadow cabinet will be interesting to see how he balances that. I'll be interested to see what he does with Leslyn Lewis, because I think Leslyn Lewis is a ball of crazy. And I think that she'll create problems if you put her in too prominent a role. If you don't put her in, you don't give her some kind of role, she'll create problems for you. It's like, that's just, so there's things like that.
I think it's going to be iron fisted that way, Scott. Like, if anybody's going to say a crazy thing, it's going to be Poilievre. Nobody else gets to say a crazy thing.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's right. I think crazy is their corner. Stay the fuck out of it, right? Because if it's my crazy, it's party orthodoxy. If it's your crazy, it's stepping out of line, and we put you to the sword. I'll be really interested in this. How does he handle himself in question period? And the reason I say that is he is such a spectacular question period performer within the narrow boundaries of what junkies like us define as spectacular performance. He kicks the shit out of people. He's unfair. He hammers them. He's quick on his feet. He's got clever lines prepared and clever lines at the ready, but it's all very sharp and hard. And I wonder, because they know that nobody really watches it. So do they do that, package it up and feed it out through social media to their base and say, that's good, that's red meat for our base? Do they lay off of it a little bit so that he doesn't look so hard and so acerbic? Because if you notice, he sort of changed his gear a little bit in his leadership speech. So I'll be interested to see, how he presents himself in question period, where he lays off of the throttle a little bit, or if he's just himself. And if he's just himself, then I think the Liberals might have an opportunity to pull him into a couple of traps, get him into a couple of, box canyons with his own rhetoric at some point.
I bet on general he goes pretty hard, because I think that part of their objective, their strategic objective, is to label this government as incompetent, which the government's laying track for itself. And so I think that they want to move in that direction. And part of that is him proving that Trudeau isn't up to snuff.
I think I agree with that.
What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, you guys were talking with Alan Gregg, and he made the comment, find an issue, make it your own. And that's very clearly what Pierre did during the leadership campaign. I think you see a more refined version of it now around inflation and his answers to that. But I think they'll be looking for, any and every way to be talking about the cost of living and why the government isn't doing something, and having that be a thread through everything. And it's not on him to come forward with all the solutions to that. Talking about the problem when you're opposition leader and shining a light on the government for it that's your mandate. And I think we're going to see a ton of that in question period. I think you'll see a ton of it in the communications the party puts out. You probably see it in some paid advertising sooner than later. And so you really, I think that's, it's going to be all in on that for at least the foreseeable future here.
So I've been going on and on in this podcast about how, and on other forums when I'm invited other places, which is rarely, I've been going on and on about how there's been no bounce for Poilievre out of the leadership. Not the kind of traditional bounce you see. Now we see one, and it's still a modest one by historic standards for leaderships, but there is one, and I'm interested in what you people think people saw this week, because the move happened post-leadership convention, and, it's modest. The Conservatives look like they're up 3 points maybe. The Liberals look like they're down 3 or 4 points maybe. The NDP at 23, according to Leger. And I've been sitting here trashing the NDP for the stupidity of their agreement with the Liberals, and then Leger comes along and says they're at 23%. What do you think people might have been reacting to? Since we just said that it was a low-key week for Poilievre and that the Queen was dominating coverage, why were people changing their political voting intention this week?
Well, look, so, first on the bounce, I mean, you used to see in the US, have your primary, the candidate speaks, so then you immediately look for the bounce. So same thing in Canada. You see a lot less of that now. I mean, it's such a polarized system. People are in their camps. There's just less movement between the parties. And I was looking at the Abacus poll last night, and you see a hardening already happening. Like Liberals and NDPers hate the man more, Conservatives like him more. So there's sort of an increasing push on that. But I think, and how do people get their news today? You get the Apple alert or whatever you get, Pierre Poilievre's elected, people sort of dig in. What's he talking about? And if you dug in for a second on that night, you saw a man talking about cost of living, and you saw his wife really humanize him and give a fantastic intro to him that I think, provided some answers into who is this man and what sort of makes him tick beyond politics. And so there was some nice stuff to see there, whether it endures, whether it's a foundation sort of TBD, but I do think there was something there on a big issue.
Scott, when you hover around 30, the bad news is that when you have a bad week, you hit 28 or 27.
Yeah. Which is a good segue into what I think my take is, which is that my take is this is more about the Liberals than it is about Poilievre so far. We'll see. I think there's a pinch. I think I'm with Dennis. I think there's a pinch of curiosity. Like, hey, I kind of bounced through. There's a new guy. Let me hear a bit about him, all that kind of stuff. And maybe that drifts you up 2-3 points. So you go from 32 or 33 to 35. We'll have to see where the polls settle out after a week or two. But I don't know that it's not a bounce in the sense that it's like when you were in high school gym, and they'd be like, ooh, we're teeing up the beat board. But the beat board isn't the trampoline. It gets you this high, right? It doesn't give you that high. So, but what I do think is distressing, if you're looking at it, is the underlying numbers about, right direction, wrong direction. To me, these polls tell the Liberals, you don't have a Pierre Poilievre problem. You got a fucking you problem, right? And you better fix some of the issues that are going on. Or Pierre Poilievre will hoover up support. At minimum, these polls do tell you that people are not saying, I couldn't possibly choose him. Okay, so sorry, off my dance card, never, right? People are open to considering him, maybe open to ticking that box, at least in a poll. But I mean, fundamentally, if people do not become persuaded that the government is as seized with the cost of living crisis as they themselves are in their daily lives, then it's going to be bad for the government. So they've got to use this fall to retrench and reorient.
I do think something on this week too, you look at it feels different. And what I mean by that is there's an acceptance amongst people that the Trudeau government has sort of more days behind it than ahead. And we'll see where it all goes, obviously. But you see people looking at Pierre saying, wow, this guy's got like a real shot here in a way that maybe the last two leaders didn't get a bit of that out of the gate. And I think I'm hearing that amongst liberals. I hear it amongst people who they're not rooting for him at all. Like they don't want him to win, but they're looking at him in a different way. And I think when I look at this, to the original question on this first week here, I think he understood that. And he didn't come out of the gate super hot. He didn't come out of the gate, sort of guns blazing. He's taking his time to do this right because the stakes suddenly feel higher, both from an issues perspective, but also from this guy controls the party. And, he is able to, I think, take a longer view and a longer march than his predecessors had available.
And the Liberals got to take advantage of that. Like Trudeau has to take this and seize this and flip it, right? And go, you know what? This is a comeback moment for me, okay? Get back to being the guy who's underestimated, show some game. It's not the worst thing in the world if people start underestimating you again. You can actually make the argument, how in fuck could people make the mistake of underestimating Trudeau after every time he's rinsed everybody else? But that dynamic can be helpful, provided you're actually trying to leverage it and do something, right? But if you just drift, well, then it's not helpful. Then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I'm going to be really interested to see which one of them gets the tone right. Because they start in really difficult places. Because Liberals hate Poilievre with a passion that most Canadians are not going to muster. And Liberals are offended at things about Poilievre that many, many Canadians are not going to be offended at about Poilievre. And similarly, the Conservatives are irrational about Trudeau. I mean, this business about the singing Bohemian Rhapsody, this is a classic example. The umbrage that they've taken about this. And, I think most Canadians are going to find that, frankly, a little bit endearing. And to use Dennis's word, humanizing. But on the other hand, when Trudeau gets into the back and forth with people, he has, and I know quite a bit about this phenomenon personally, he has a tendency to get glib and flip. I think that he has to master how to respond to Poilievre in a way that understands how most people are going to be viewing what Poilievre is doing and vice versa. And I don't think either of them are in that headspace right now. So it's going to be really interesting for me to see who actually nails the tone.
David, do you remember that time after President Reagan passed away and Paul was in office and we were in a hotel somewhere and Paul started doing this fucking kick-ass cover of Pour Some Sugar on Me? And I think you or Pimblett was playing. And I thought to myself, God, thank Christ there were no cameras around back in the day, right? People.
Yeah. One thing I do think we need to better sort of wrap our heads around, though, in terms of these guys going head to head, is how much of this is persuading people who are with the other guys and how much of this is driving turnout. And when you look at the leadership race here, it was all about driving turnout for Pierre, signing up new members, getting people engaged in a new way. And, we're in this era where voter turnout is very low. We're going to be probably, again, it'll be 50 to 60 for next election. If you can find a way to bring in people who aren't traditionally part of politics, who aren't traditionally voting, and that's almost half the country at this point, you can really change the dynamic here. And so I think so much of the time we spend talking about is how do you convince the other guy to come to your table? Well, I think for Pierre, there's a big calculus here on can he get people who don't normally vote or aren't normally engaged to come out? And that's a huge challenge, but it clearly seems to be part of the calculation here.
But Dennis, you still need around 39% of the vote to win a majority government, right? If you're polling at 32, 33, it would be amazing to be able to bump that up to 39 through just turnout.
Plus, you got to be very careful to not become a rage mirror, right? So first, whether or not the project of trying to animate people who traditionally don't vote because they are disenchanted with politics completely, whether you can actually get them to vote, that's a very big open question. And
it's
second, very tough. And I'm not dismissing it, but it's a tall order. And then one of the traps of it seems to me, is that the most obvious way to try to successfully pursue it is to feed back to people their own rage, to say, I want to start by agreeing with you. And people are spewing off conspiracy and disinformation. So then you get yourself into the box of agreeing, repeating, associating yourself with stuff that then is terribly alienating to the other 34%. I want to go back to something you said, though, David, because I think it's really important. I talked earlier about, you said the tone issue for both sides. Mentioned Poilievre in question period. I agree he'll be aggressive. I just think he's got to be careful not to be unlikable, and that's a real trick for him, like not to be a dink, right? And so there's that. But for the Liberals, boy, their impulse so frequently, and we've seen it all summer, is to be haughty, right? It's to say, let me start by explaining what you don't understand about the things you're talking about. And it fucking enrages people. And so, my advice to the government in question period, in tone, in newsers and scrums would be, this is your swing thought, okay? When you're looking at the Conservatives, you're not stupid, you're wrong. Like, make the argument that they're wrong. Do not make the argument that they're stupid, okay? You're not better than them. You're not smarter than them. You're not gifted by dint of birth to be superior to them, right? They're wrong, you're right. Explain why and explain the differences in contrast, right? Right? Not stupid, you're wrong. Really important for them to get tone right.
I agree, but I would flip it. Trudeau's way smarter than Conservatives think he is. Like, the conventional wisdom is that this guy should never have had this job. He doesn't have the chops, all that kind of stuff. He's a smart guy. They'll find that out if they underestimate it, in my view. Dennis, one last thing about this from you is to all of the centrists out there who were expecting a mass exodus after the convention of people who felt that the battle for the soul of the party had been lost and therefore needed to either reject that party or start a new one. I've missed those people. Did that happen?
Well, we know there sure wasn't very many of them. I mean,
no, fuck.
And this is such an example of where, I think this conversation largely took place in the media, who very disconnected from the party itself. I mean, sure, are there clearly, looking at those results, 15, 17% of people? I'm not even sure all of them, because I know a bunch of people who voted for Herle who are, totally fine with Pierre winning. It wasn't like for all of them, this was some sort of litmus test.
Including apparently Tasha Sheridan.
Yeah. Well,
I was doing the coverage for CTV.
So there you go.
For 3 months, and even the day of the convention, where I'm on TV with her, and she's talking about how, this could be the fiery furnaces of hell if he succeeds. And he's like, "Oh, I like the speech. Actually, cool with this. Sounds to me like we got a new guy, right? Right on." Anyway, my books are for sale on Amazon.
What was I thinking?
Yeah, look, there was no, I'm convinced that Pierre would have won. If you take the membership from 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, and you say nobody could have bought a new membership and you just had to vote on the legacy membership, he still would have won this thing big time. Yes, he added a lot of people into the mix, but the party itself is very comfortable with the direction he's headed, and they're happy with him.
For the past few weeks, we've been traveling through South Korea, Australia, Sweden, the UK, Germany, France, and the US. A world tour on our presenting sponsor TELUS's ticket. International best practices of countries who are using evidence to make effective policy around how they allocate their spectrum. So what have we learned through it all, hurly-burlyites? Well, if Canada wants to gain as much economic, social, and environmental benefit as possible from digital technologies, we need to heed the examples of countries around the world. And in TELUS's view, adopt this simple objective for Canadian spectrum policy. Put as much spectrum to use for the benefit of all Canadians as quickly as possible. They believe to achieve this, the way we allocate and manage that spectrum needs to be modernized to better fit the needs of our country. Our ability to compete in the innovation economy and our environmental priorities are all tied to digital solutions. Having optimal policy around spectrum is critical to achieving these goals. And that all comes down to evidence and data, hurly-burlyites. Two words with which I'm intimately familiar: evidence that takes into account best practices from around the world, and data that clearly shows how a policy is impacting a stated objective. Remember those two words. We're going to talk about them more next week. All right, so let's move on to a new topic, which is the relationship between Poilievre and the media. Because, 4 years ago, when Scott and I were working for Kathleen Wynne, the Conservatives unveiled the innovation of not taking the media on a tour with them, and making it relatively difficult for the mainstream media to cover you, which normally would have been a weird thing to do because you were looking for profile from the newspapers and the media outlets. And then in this leadership campaign, I don't think Poilievre did a single interview with a mainstream media outlet at any point. And he ignored it, essentially, assuming that they would cover his rallies. We talked about this a little bit, Scott, in the last couple of weeks, assuming that they would cover his rallies, which they did. And he communicated through social media with people that he wanted to communicate with. And then immediately after winning the leadership, he calls a news conference in which he intends to answer no questions, in which he intends to not take a question, just issue a statement. And when a journalist takes umbrage at that, and I'm not going to debate whether what he did was appropriate or not necessarily, but I probably would have understood where he was going. When a media, they demonize him and attack him out there. So what is the relationship with Poilievre going to be like with the mainstream media? And does it matter anymore at all? Can he literally just give them the big FU, never appear on Question Period, never do a thing with Rosie Barton, never do any of that stuff, and be successful? Dennis.
Well, so, I mean, here's where I'd start by answering that. I spent a lot of time thinking about, how do people find out about things anymore? Like, how do people gather their information? And I think you got to start there. And, does the media, does news matter? Well, of course it does. If somebody's like driving in their car and they hear a report on the radio, or they see a headline in a newspaper box, if they ever see one, or they get an alert on their phone, whatever it is, all of these things are part of an ecosystem where people are gathering information. And I do think it is important to separate out the Ottawa Press Gallery and maybe the opinion side of columnists and news from sort of actual news and what are people sort of hearing and learning. And I look at a lot of what happens in Ottawa and a lot of what happens in the columnist world and others as, you watch a hockey game on a Saturday night. Okay, you're a normal person. You're watching the hockey game. You find out who won or lost. Do you stick around to watch the analysis afterwards? Are you tuning into SportsCenter at 2 a.m. to get the last update? The 2 a.m. update is a lot of what the news coverage in Ottawa is these days. There's a group of people that are super, super into it. A lot of them live on Twitter. They're, generally speaking, hardcore partisans who are sort of part of the mix. And that's separate from, did you actually get a news alert on your phone that Pierre had 5,000 people at his rally? These are different things. And so, the algorithms matter more now, whether it's that TikTok, Facebook, whatever, you look at the video views Pierre's getting a couple million views on videos he's posting. I don't see a CBC or a global news getting those kind of viewerships on things anymore. So stuff has changed. And to maybe your other question here, do I think it's going to be a good or not good relationship? It's going to be a not good relationship because the power imbalance has completely changed. And you've got a group of reporters and whatnot in Ottawa who live in an era when they were the gatekeepers, when they were the most important people. They're not anymore. The politicians understand that. Trudeau understands this too, by the way. And it's, it's a very... it's not a nice relationship. And I don't think I see that changing anytime soon.
Scott, like me, you're old and you've spent your life attempting to master the mainstream media and figure out how to bend them to your will. What do you think about this?
Yeah, you just described me as a blacksmith in the 21st century. That's great. I hear exactly what Dennis is saying. I would say, I'll go back to the point I made about unlikable. I think a critical priority for Poilievre is to not let himself be defined as unlikable, not just in the eyes of like columnists, but in general terms. And it's a fine balance because he is so barbed wired, he is so hard edged that it can slip. And so when it comes to dealing with the media, and specifically with the Parliamentary Press Gallery and the established media, and conservatives and Dennis just use the term, we'll call them gatekeepers and all that kind of stuff, I think there's science and art. The science might take you to what Dennis is saying, which is, you know what? We've run the math, we've looked it over, and we don't need you. And that may be true, but the art of it is don't be a cock, right? And when you hammer David Akin in a news conference, you look like a cock because guess what? My mom doesn't know who David Akin is. She doesn't recognize his voice. All she sees is a man at a podium who is now, whether he likes it or not, the establishment. He's power. He's standing behind the podium. He's the leader. He's got standing. And when he uses that, in order to wheel on some nameless, voiceless person and looks like he's kicking down, well, then he looks like a cock. So there's going to be, I know they're going to overwhelmingly bypass the parliamentary press gallery. But, you know, they're going to have to figure out how to manage ignoring them without being antagonistic, because in many ways, the art is people are impressionistic. And I don't know how it all works, but there is some kettle of moments, sentences, looks, behaviors that people put together, and at some point they would draw an impression. And he can't look like he's always at war with the parliamentary press gallery, because the risk, and maybe it won't manage, but there's a risk that he'll look like a cock. And that's what I think is really, really delicate for them, because I think their impulse and their science will take them to, we don't need them, and to hell with them. But there's art with that science you got to manage.
Prediction. Will Poilievre hold a full news conference at the National Press Theatre?
At some point.
I can see at some point, sure. But I do agree with what Scott's saying, though. There's an art to it. And you're as Pierre, you're building a brand, right? And every little thing contributes to it. If we take the science and look at the numbers, yeah, it's probably not worth your time. Go do other things. But if people see all these little tidbits here and there, and they catch a clip on the news, they catch whatever is saying in the car on the radio, and if you're hey, I'm open, I'm accessible, I'm doing all this kind of stuff, and you're fighting with reporters, well, that's a clash. And I'm not saying that's the case for Pierre, but you got to make sure you have your actual, like, what are you trying to get across, and use every medium to do that. Whether it's your own video, whether it's an interview, whether it's a speech, be consistent across it all.
There's an impression in a lot of circles in Canada that journalists have no credibility anymore, but that's not what my polling has ever told me. That journalists are still quite respected in the country, and they certainly have a lot more credibility than politicians have. So,
when I media train people, I warn them that one of the reasons that they must maintain eye contact with the person that's interviewing them, one of the reasons you want to lean forward and smile, even when that interviewer is being aggressive, is that in the absence of any other stimulus, the audience will use the reporter or the broadcaster as a delegate for themselves. And therefore, if you're antagonistic toward the interviewer, you can't be sure that the audience doesn't think you're being antagonistic toward them. And, it's art, like Dennis and I are saying.
Every day now, some very long trains are making their way out of the prairies, headed to seaports in British Columbia and Eastern Canada. They're loaded with Canada's famously excellent grain, and that grain is shipped in something called hopper cars, sometimes 200 at a time. Our sponsor, CN, has been building a fleet of new hopper cars. It will have 6,000 of them, new generation and high capacity, by the time they're all deployed. Why, you ask, are they called hopper cars? Well, faithful listeners, I have the answer. The word hopper originated in Old England, sometime in the 14th century. A hopper was basically a funnel into which millers poured grains to be ground into flour. As you might guess, hoppers hopped, and as they shook, they separated, the wheat from the chaff. One of the first references to hoppers was in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Anyway, here we are 700 years later, and Canada's grain crop is being moved from Western Canada to market in these rather ingeniously engineered cars. They don't hop, but they sure roll, and they make loading and unloading the grain as smooth and quick as possible. The new fleet of hopper cars is just one piece in a series of purchases and equipment upgrades CN has undertaken in recent years to ensure it can continue to deliver cargo safely and on time. And there is no more vital cargo than grain. By the time this year's crop is all shipped, CN reckons it'll have moved 28 million tons. It's hardly news anymore that supply chains worldwide are clogged and unreliable. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine, another major global supplier of grain, has triggered worldwide distortions of supply and demand. So it's kind of something for CN to be able to report that it is current on grain orders as the season moves into its heaviest months, meaning shipments are leaving and arriving on schedule, which was the plan all along. Okay, so we all know the big political fight, at least for this fall and maybe for a long time, is going to be about the cost of living. It's going on. It's a huge issue in the country. According to all polling, it dominates all other issues as far as, and not just because it's some sort of thing that's been whipped up in media, but because people are actually feeling a pinch in their lives. Most Canadians are feeling some impact from this, and many are feeling quite a significant impact from it. I think today we got a slight easing of the inflation number from Stats Canada, 7%, I think down from a high of 8.1. And there's certainly evidence that gas prices are easing, but the issue is not going away, particularly. Poilievre blames government spending for this and proposes tax cuts which he's not specified, other than presumably the carbon tax acts. And the Trudeau government has brought out targeted low-income programs, the GST tax credit, dental care subsidies, and a housing subsidy for people. Who's going to win this fight?
Well, I'll start. I mean, that's who's going to win this fight is quite the question there. What I will say is, I think something Scott said earlier on, this government having a tendency to be sort of explaining and lecturing, explaining all the reasons why you're wrong. And there's that old adage, if you're explaining, you're losing. And where I think the government has got this wrong is, I don't pick up any frustration or outrage from them on cost of living increases. I don't get the sense that the prime minister is particularly upset or concerned about it. I don't get the sense that the finance minister is upset or concerned about it. They haven't found a way to convey the fact that they're taking this really seriously beyond, some words and press releases. And you put that up against, somebody like Pierre, who's seems very clearly outraged by it, has got all kinds of great tangible examples, from the cost of bacon to the cost of rent and housing. And so, you've got somebody who's got the emotive right and kind of got the cognitive right. And you've got the government here who's, kind of like they were with airports back in the summer, all kinds of explaining, well, people aren't taking their water bottles out of their backpacks. It's like, there's gigantic lines at the airport. Be upset about it like everybody else. And so I don't think they haven't been seized with the problem. And that's at least a start.
It's a severe case of governmentitis, right? Where you're explaining to people why they should be fine with shit they're not fine with, as opposed to sharing their outrage. I mean, God, if in your 7th year of government, it would be possible for you to cast your mind back to what you would have said about a subject when you were in opposition, right? That's where your head has to be, right?
Well, I agree with that, but there's two schools of thought, right? And we got on the sharp edge of that, David. I mean, remember, when we were responding to Gomery and saying, this is absolutely objectionable. I'm as outraged as anybody, and we're going to fucking do something. So we get why you're upset, and we're going to do something about it. Well, then you and I got pilloried, right? Not to mention the prime minister, who was actually in charge of the government, got pilloried for saying, oh, well, it's an anger tour, and you're telling people that, you're the problem and so forth. So you'll get that.
Serge Savard has never forgiven me.
Yeah, fuck Serge Savard. Anyway, Serge Savard, Jesus Christ.
So what was your point?
Give me Rick Green. Well, where I guess I would go is the obvious formula is you have to demonstrate to people, to Dennis's point, that you get it. Okay. And then second, you have to show people you're helping. And if you can't show people you're helping, you at minimum must show that other people who purport to take your job and do something different would hurt. And so I got all, crumpled up because of the Queen's passing. So, they were coming out of the cabinet retreat. They were going to make the announcement. Then it got delayed. And then by the time it got announced, it kind of lost a bunch of its punch and stuff. But to me, governmentitis was encapsulated in the approach that the government took, where it talks about the GST rebate, all right, and dental. Again, the dental thing to me is programmatic response. I'm on the record on that. I don't think that's where you want to go. But on the GST rebate, their logic is, well, this is a better thing because it's going to reward those that need it most. That doesn't come through. It's not well communicated. And I think the better way, in order to make that point, don't paint yourself as a hero, paint the villain. So say, well, like, why wait for Pierre Poilievre to tell us what his tax remedy is? Say, look, he says he's going to cut taxes. Okay, so here's what he's going to do. He can cut HST or he can cut income taxes across the board. And you know what? Here's who benefits and who doesn't. This is how, the rich get richer and you get fucked. And so that's what the problem is. So here's what he wants to do. His answer to cost of living is to do this, is to make the rich richer and you worse off. Our answer is we're going to do it this way. Like, present it that way. Don't just go, listen, we actually put together some smart people at Privy Council and Finance and we came up with a GST rebate and it's better, period. That's it. Today, they're going to make the mistake. I guarantee you, they're going to make the mistake of saying that CPI is cooling. Well, not acceptable and still far too high is a sign that our plan is working, we're moving in the right direction. Except what real people will feel is that groceries are going up. Right? CPI is coming down modestly because gas prices fluctuate, which, if we want to be honest, is a function of world markets and doesn't actually have much to do with anything. But that actually also bites the government, because if you want to claim some credit, you got to be careful. We don't know that they won't fluctuate again in the wrong direction. If underlying all of that is that groceries are getting more expensive and you're on the stump telling middle class people that actually the problem is getting better and my plan is working, careful what you wish for. Now that's governmentitis. I would attack Pierre Poilievre on this.
But I think part of the thing is here to understand with David, you would know this as a pollster here. It's not just people struggling to get by who are pissed off and mad about inflation. There are plenty of people, and maybe I put the three of us in this category, I don't know, who probably don't really have an issue paying for groceries week in, week out, but I'm getting annoyed with how expensive they are. And there's an anger in the country over the cost of everything, over supply chain disruptions, over all this kind of stuff. And it's okay, I think, to want that fixed and not be like, well, I can't afford my rent this month. And the government is, I think, a little over-indexed on, talking about this in a way that is helping people who are really, really struggling. And yeah, let's help them. But there's a lot of people out there who are mad. And if you leave them to Pierre will just vacuum them all up.
No, I think that, Dennis, I could not agree with you more. All the polling that I'm seeing is indicating that anger about this runs pretty high up the income scale. And that while people are generous toward the disadvantaged or the really struggling, everybody's looking for a little help themselves too. And so something that's just for other people, no matter how deserving or meritorious those other people might be, is not really going to be a political winner for the government.
Other people's solutions are really dangerous in something that's as broadly and fully felt as this. And I don't think the government has shown any sense that it absorbs that.
How many times have you pondered this question over your morning coffee or fancy matcha tea? Does Canada have enough shipping container capacity? Yeah, thought not. Well, I'm here to tell you the answer is an unequivocal no, we don't. And on behalf of our newest sponsor, the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, why it's so important they build Roberts Bank Terminal 2. The Port of Vancouver is our country's largest port and already a vital hub, and it's only becoming more vital. Business and trade needs are growing in Canada. Marine container terminals link businesses, big and small, to the global economy. Just think about what's been happening these last couple of years with our supply chains. Connecting Canadians with the goods they need when they need them means scaling up before we run out of space, strengthening the connections between Canada and the rest of the world. Roberts Bank Terminal 2 will do that. And it's not just about delivering the much-needed container capacity. When it's all built, the economic impact will be 17,300 well-paying jobs and $3 billion in additional GDP annually. Which brings us to the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. So why should they build it? Well, they've got a proven track record of building sustainable infrastructure projects and are a trusted partner to government, Indigenous groups, local communities, and Canadian businesses. I've thrown a lot at you here, and we'll talk more about this project in the coming weeks, including how it can help lower the cost of consumer products we all use. That's sort of important, eh? But for now, I just want to leave you with this thought. For all the reasons I just talked about, Roberts Bank Terminal 2 is the opportunity Canada needs. So, Scott, you recommended our cursed clipping this week. It's Jacques Gallant's piece in The Star about what if we wanted to replace the monarchy. And I'm just going to summarize this in one sentence. A constitutional change of this order would require unanimity among all governments in the country, and presumably would require, as we learned in Charlottetown and Meech and others, a much broader consensus than that in the country among Indigenous groups, other stakeholders, etc. So it can't happen. So no matter how much you hate the monarchy, no matter how much you hate King Charles, you can't get rid of it, because the alternative is years and years of constitutional infighting, because surely to God, some province or another is going to bring some issue other than the monarchy to the table once you start talking about the Constitution. And we're back into that, and nobody in Canada wants that. So King Charles, long live the king, right? Dennis?
Well, so I can't wait to hear Scott's take here, but I was a little surprised. I was at the PR, convention there, I guess now 2 weeks ago. And I was thinking to myself, every speaker who came up to stage has something, wonderful to say about the Queen and, long live the king and all that kind of stuff. And they had the soundtrack was like the Titanic funeral music playing the whole time. And it was this big sad moment. And I didn't realize, and I don't think this is actually the case, that Conservatives, just to give one group, but then let's get into the others, are all that, unanimous on the Crown and the monarchy. I mean, I think there certainly are some who are there for that tradition, but you think back to the Katie Alliance days and others, there was all kinds of discussions about ditching the monarchy. And
I would have associated that more with the old PC party and Toryism than with the current Conservative movement.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was a little surprised by that, but I guess you also have a moment you want to be respectful and you can like the Queen and not like the monarchy. So I'm surprised that the debate has felt so not existent. I think we'll see over time. It's not going to change, but I think, Charles is not going to, I don't think, have the same reverence that the Queen Elizabeth did. And so I think we might see this discussion bubble over time, but kind of like Alberta separatism and other things, like these are like, they're like, to see it actually happen it's not going to happen.
I wonder if we're making the mistake of smuggling as a political class, falling into a process trap and going, the reason I won't talk about it is because it can't be done. Right. And I recognize that it cannot be done. And I recognize that there are risks to even suggesting that you would do it, because then people go, really? Well, what about Indigenous? What about the Senate? And the next thing you know, it's Charlottetown. And I was on the National Yes Youth Committee for Charlottetown, and I can testify for all of you that is a clusterfuck.
Crackerjack job, by the way.
I thought, you know what?
Crackerjack job.
We narrowly won the popular vote in Ontario, and I personally want to take a little credit for that, because I was handing out flags at the Rogers Centre, Sky Dome as it was known then more properly. The only thing, I guess, I look at it and I think, because I'm with Dennis. Like, I watched I was doing coverage of the Conservative Convention. I was having the same thought, and everyone I was texting with was Conservatives, other broadcasters were all kind of watching us going, Jesus, man, it feels heavy on the Queen. 12 days, 13 days, right? And I come from United Empire Loyalist country in Eastern Ontario. I come from Prince Edward County. But it just felt heavy on the Queen. Then we got Prince Charles. I don't think he has the same reverence as you say with people. I think, we're going to watch, a number of Commonwealth countries do take steps to divorce themselves from the constitutional monarchy. And I just wonder if there's any juice in saying, I know it can't be done, but just so we're crystal clear, I think it ought to be done. I think that given our druthers, Canada ought not to have to form the Privy Council under the seal of King Charles.
Don't you have to have another proposal? Don't you have to have a proposal if you say that? And what kind of proposal is going to be more popular than the monarchy?
I don't know. I think you could say, is there any juice? And I'm talking shit, I know. But I also wonder if, for a guy who, like Trudeau, who wants to reconnect and rejuvenate, particularly with younger voters, right? Do you say something like, look, I'll tell you what, I've got an open constitutional conference policy here. We will move and gavel an end to the constitutional monarchy at any moment that you guys want to, okay? So if I can get 7 yeses, that's worth knowing. If I can get 9, great. All of you, great. I know I'm not going to, but just understand, I just want it on the record, right? If that's where you want to go, I'm there. That's what I think personally. I'm not going to chew up resources and energy and not focus on cost of living, because I am focusing on constitutional monarchy. But if people are open to it, I am there in a minute. And Like, I just wonder if that puts him on the right side of the issue as opposed to us all mewling about process.
I don't know, Dennis, what do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting points you're raising in terms of, we're all looking at this from a process perspective. No voter's looking at that. If we're in a world a year from now where, King Charles is sitting at a 20% approval rating in the country, I mean, obviously there's political opportunity there.
And Scotland have gone, and New Zealand have gone, and Australia, and we're going, how come us?
Yeah. I mean, where I get really leery is on the alternatives. And, I don't want a world where a governor general and prime minister are jetting around like they're members of the royal family themselves for Canada. And, we just got a different system here. So it's a ball of thread to pull on. But I do think, I bet you this discussion is going to come up a lot more the next couple of years than it's come up in the previous. That's for sure.
And do you think people care? Like, I actually don't know. That's not a loaded question because I don't have actually any data on this. I've never done any research on whether people really give a shit about this one way or another. Yeah. I find it hard to believe they do.
I suspect this is one where, caring and motivation are very separate. You can, in a way, not, think, well, I wish we didn't have the monarchy anymore, but have no real motivation to change their vote or act in any different ways based on it coming up.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's why I raise it that you can only put it forward in a sense of, listen, it's an opt-in thing. If people want to get together on Sunday night at 7, we'll play cribbage and we'll fucking change the constitutional association with the monarchy. I think that there's some juice in that, possibly. I just like being on the right side of the issue because I do think that people are going, this feels anachronistic, and it feels particularly anachronistic with Charles.
All right, Gordon Pinsent, time for the Hey Yous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Dennis, what do you got for us today? Who do you shouting out to?
Okay, my Hey Yous, it's a two-parter for this person. I'm giving a shout out to Melissa Lansman here. First, congratulations on being deputy leader of the Conservative Party. She's a former colleague and friend. I think she's awesome. And but my second part of it here is a bit of a pumping of her tires. I think the Conservative Party has been hungry for a reset, for a next generation of leaders, people who weren't former cabinet ministers in the Harper government or haven't been around as much in the public eye. And I think Melissa's sitting on a gigantic opportunity here to be part of that supporting cast behind the new leader, really build up that next generation of conservative values and support and get out there and I think the world of her. And I'm going to be rooting for her to do just that.
Excellent. She's a friend of all of ours.
Friend of all of us.
Scott? I'm much less excited about her being successful now than I was when she was working with you in private practice, but your friend.
Yeah, as I said on Twitter, I wish her every success. I hope she remains in that post for many years to come. I'm going to stick with the conservative sort of bent of that. My Hey You goes out to Nick Kouvalis, again, someone who is a friend of all of us, a true master of the dark magics, spells, potions, all sorts of terrible hijinks. Nick is dedicating his sorcerer's energies to the race in Brampton. For whatever reason, he seems to be highly motivated to take out Patrick Brown. I will add to his excess of outrage and just say, my Hey You, Nick, I know it's an uphill battle. I know that Brampton will probably return the guy. I know that name recognition and infrastructure of support and all of that incumbency advantage means that Patrick Brown will be reelected. But God damn it, I love you, Nick. Go, Nick, go. Take that guy out.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that too. I think we can all agree on that too. And my Hey You goes out to the powers that be in the Liberal Party, whether that be at the party office or in the PMO. Focus groups. Don't rely on data to get your guidance about Poilievre and the relationship between him and Trudeau. Spend a lot of time in focus groups learning what you can about Poilievre and what people think about him in key demographics and key voting blocks, and measure it against Trudeau and understand that dynamic. And it is a dynamic. Can't be read through data. So get out there, meet some people, talk to them. Thank you, Dennis, for being our guest today. Really great to have you here. Scott, thank you as always. And to our sponsors, TELUS, CN, and our new sponsor, the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. thank you for your support of this podcast. Thank you for doing it. And come back next week for more Cursive Politics. See you then.